Welcome back to Desk-Bound Aviator. To those of you who have been here before, to some of my subscribers, and to those of you who have never been in this space before, this is a place for having some fun with X-plane aircraft. It's not a place for learning how to fly or comparing professional notes. It's just for fun. And we're going to have some fun today in a brand new aircraft. What you're looking at here is the HotStart TBM900, which yours truly just purchased. And it is a terrific piece of work, let me tell you. It is loaded with details, and that's what makes it really interesting. When they speak about steady aircraft, this thing takes a lot of study just to operate and just to get it started, as you will see. We're going to try to do this in one video today. I don't know if we'll succeed, but if not, we'll do it in two pieces. But let's get started. First of all, we've given this aircraft a name, a call designation, which is Tango Bravo Mike Sierra Hilo. That's got a personal attachment to it. So anyway, let's get started in Tango Bravo Mike Sierra Hilo. And we start that by doing some maintenance items, first of all, which you do in the panel over here on the side of the screen. There's an airframe manager where you can name the aircraft. There's a maintenance manager that's just loaded with things regarding the maintenance of the engine, the airframe, wheels and landing gear, lighting, batteries, you name it. It's all in there, and you all have to keep track of it, or you owe a lot of money. It's an expensive proposition, this airplane. Let's go here to Payload. And in Payload, I'll just lower this down so you can see. Maybe I'll raise the screen up so you can see the airplane a little better. There, that's better. First thing we need to do is to set up the aircraft for departure. And we do that by removing some of these little flags and protective covers that are on various components. These are like the wing wicks, they call them. And back here are static devices. And then on the bottoms of the wings underneath there, I don't know if you can see it, there's a pitot tubes on either wing. So we'll uncover those. We've got our doors open. We can go inside, or at least we can determine what our cargo and loading is going to be. We'll sign a co-pilot. Well, let's leave it a young lady. That'd be nice. I was going to say that's you, and I'm not sure if you're that way or not. But anyway, let's make it a female co-pilot. That'd be fun. Cargo. Let's add some cargo. Let's say 50 pounds up front, and in the stern, let's say 75 or 80. That should be fine. We'll leave the back empty. Point of fact, the developer has not implemented the passengers yet, so even though you add them here, and even though the weights are calculated for the performance of the aircraft, the actual physical people that you may want to load back here, they haven't implemented that yet. All right, let's close the cargo hatch. We'll leave the door open for this moment. Next thing we can do is uncover the prop covers and the covers over the cowling by taking those off. And lastly, we'll install a ground power unit, and that'll help us power up the aircraft. Now we can close the cabin door, pilot and co-pilot. You see, I told you they haven't implemented it yet. So let's go ahead and make that a guide just so that that's consistent. Let's hop in the back and take a look at that. First of all, we can get rid of this screen. And let's close the back door here by using the button that's on the side of the cabin. You just hold that in, the stair comes up, the big door comes down, and then we have to latch it with this big latch. We'll look around, we've got nice accoutrements in here, folding table that goes away if you like, shades that go up and down, fully functioning, very nice looking cabin in the back. Now we can go up front and take a look around the cockpit. There's the upper panel, lights down here. These are interesting. These headphones, if you put those on, those will squelch some of the sound coming from, among other things, the generator. Here's a timer of how many hours the airplane has been in operation. That's very accurate, by the way. So to get started, the first thing we did, I've got the chocks in place. That's this sidebar here. We've got our GPU set up. We've taken our covers off. We haven't loaded fuel. We better do that. So we'll just take a look outside here, and we have to bring up that panel again, payload panel, and load some fuel. And when you do that by tapping on the fuel cap. The fuel cap comes off, and we're going to need about 150 gallons of fuel today. So I'll put 75 in this tank, and then 75 in the other tank on the other side. And then when we get done, you have to tap this device here to put the cover back on. If you don't do that, you'll be flying along and you'll see fuel spewing out of your tank, which is not very cool at all. It's very difficult to climb out there holding onto a gasoline or airplane fuel jug and try to refuel that thing in mid-flight. It's tough to do. All right, so passenger cargo is loaded. The ground power unit is connected. Next thing we want to do is come inside here and take a look at the park brakes. In order to do that, we'll have to remove the yoke. Let me just see something here. Now my key that I've assigned for yokes I haven't assigned that for this aircraft, so I'll have to fix that. But we'll get along by just removing it manually. To set the park brakes are right here. You first have to depress, if you will, the regular brakes. And I do that with a button on my yoke. So I depress those, and then I hit my B key, and that rotates that dial, and now the park brakes are set. So that's the process for dealing with park brakes. While I'm down here looking at the lower part of the console, I'll go ahead and set the fuel tank switch to the left side. You can use left or right, it makes no difference. But the two tanks are controlled by this switch, so we'll just tap that, and that switch rotates around to the left side. You can then go up here to the overhead and just check, make sure everything is off. This is kind of like a once-through scan to make sure all the switches are off that should be off, and they are. And we can come down here. The ELT, I'm looking at my notes, that's over here, and that's all set. That's the electronic. Forget what ELT really means, electronic something or other. Emergency use only. I'll have to read that. Down below, let's see, come down here. There is a CB light. We can turn that off. That stands for circuit breaker. And when you turn on the circuit breaker light, I'll show you over here, there's the circuit breaker. When you turn that switch on, you get a little light on the side of the first officer's door. Come back down here. We want to just check this. This is the mask or microphone switch, and you just want to make sure that's covered like it is. Now, let's go back up to the overhead, and let's see. I'm looking back in my list. De-icing. We'll go down through that. This is, again, just our kind of once-through check to make sure all the switches are off. In the de-icing panel, they're all off. And we'll slide over here to the ECS, the environmental controls, air conditioning, so forth. Those are all off. There's a couple of other switches down below the FO's yoke. There's a button here for static control, alternate static control, which I've never even used. And this is your ram air button. And then down below here, under this carpet, there's the emergency landing gear system with a handle and button that you press. So we'll put the carpet back on. Okay, now to get things going, we'll come up here to the upper panel, and first we'll raise this two-colored bar here. This is called the crash bar. And you don't want to do it when you're crashing, but that's what it's called. Raise that up, and then you want to assign the source of your power to where it's coming from, either battery or, in our case, GPUs. So you raise that up, and then you switch this generator switch up to main. From there, we can turn on some cabin lights, which we'll do with this button right here. Now, when we see the cabin lights, yes, I've got this set up so that all of our cabin lights are turned on. You should see those throughout the cabin. And we do. And you may hear some chimes now and then, and that's, this aircraft produces lots of different chimes. I have a key set to squelch those. So if you hear that ringing, that's because I couldn't hear it because I'm talking to you. All right, cabin lights are on. Let's and the overhead lights are on. Next is the oxygen. The oxygen is controlled by these two upper switches here. There's one for the passenger compartment, and there's one for the forward cabin. Turn that on. Then we'll take a look down here at the primary flight display, PFD. Let's get that set up. We first want to change our inset, so we'll tap on that, and then I always like to keep it black so that I can see the aircraft and I declutter it. So basically I'm just looking at our aircraft and the route line, and we can bring that back. We can go ahead and set our barometric pressure, and let's do that by looking over here at SimBrief, or rather Sky Vector. At our location right now is at Grand Junction Regional, KGJT, and we're going to fly over to Centennial, south of Denver. That's KAPA. So if we hold our cursor here, we can see 3004. All we need to do then is to dial that in right here to 3004. Nice day here in Grand Junction. But right now we're fine for the PFD. Let's go over and take a look at the MFD. You can turn that on by just flipping this little switch, this little button down here in the corner. That shows us our flight plan. And they suggest we look at the system, which you do by tapping that, and then you can observe the electrical system and make sure that you're operating off main, which is what we are, and that everything is in order. Fuel system, we've got 75 gallons loaded on either tank. And generator, I've never found out. I've got to look into more of what that means for that setting. Now we can go down to the de-ice gear, and we can do a lights check. And that's down here on a little button below these switches. You just press that and you can check your various lights throughout the cockpit. They're all on, which is good. And the CB light we've turned on, so that's all set. So now let's go back up to the PFD and finish setting that up. Yes. So what we'll go back to do here, let's see, we want to go to the PFD button. And when we do that, you'll see an item over here on the left side called Synthetic Vision. That's what you're looking at here, which is a terrific addition to this system. This is the G1000, the Garmin 1000, but this one has synthetic vision, which is phenomenal, as you'll see during our flight today. We've already established our wind setting, so that'll take place when we're in flight. We'll get some wind data there. There's none right now sitting here on the ground. The baro, we just got through setting that. CDI is set to GPS, which it should be. And the transponder should be in standby. Let's get out of synthetic vision and go back to transponder. There we go. And it should be in standby, and it is. So we'll get back out of that. Now let's jump over to the MFD. First things here, the FMC, the Flight Management Computer Complete Flight Plan, the checklist says. All right, to do that, we call up our flight plan, and you see I've got a flight plan in here from yesterday, but it doesn't have any altitudes. So I'll make a pause here, so I won't walk you through all of the procedure to do that. Most of you are probably familiar with it anyway. So I'll go ahead and import a flight plan and get the altitude set, and then I'll bring you back. All right, be with you in a second. Okay, back again. So we've got our flight plan set up with our altitudes established. We are located at KGJT. I'm going to go ahead and curse down here to the next waypoint, and then I'm going to just make that leg active by tapping that button right there. And then we can get out of our flight plan, and then let's use a key here on my keyboard that'll open up a couple of other screens within this standard FMS screen. This is your standby radar, and we'll set that to operate after we're airborne. And then we'll curse down here. This is your weather. Let's see. First is navigation map, then traffic map, and then weather radar. And let's check the mode on that. Oops, I always do that. I always press up here in the window, and you want to use these buttons below the window, or you'll just pop the window like I just did. So we can go ahead and set that for standby. That gets the weather mode all set. And then we can scroll down further to our terrain awareness system, TAWS, and let's see what view looks like. Well, 360 is fine. We'll leave it set to that. And we don't want to inhibit it, so we'll just let it go. And then to come back to our navigation map, we just do that, and that screen will go away by itself. We can zoom in a little closer, not by rotating your mouse, but by using our zoom device, which is actually this range device here. We can rotate that, and it zooms in. Our aircraft is located somewhere in this white area. You can't really see it because both are white. All right, so that takes care of the MFD. Now let's go to the AP panel, the autopilot panel, which is, wrong buttons up here, this panel right here. With the AP panel, we want to set the altimeter. The altimeter will appear right here. So we'll rotate the altimeter dial. Oops, we want to go to our cruising altitude, which is going to be 17,000 feet today. Then heading, we can set our departure runway, which is going to be runway 11 here at KGJI. Heading. Rotate that guy to 110. Like so. Navigation GPS mode. What we're going to do here first is I'm going to hit my T key. That's for toga. There is a button down here on the left-hand side of the power button, and I'm going to use my key to do that. And what that'll do is it'll populate the FMA screen up here. You can ignore that. It'll populate the screen with our takeoff setting. And there you can see I just hit TA. You can see the flight director coming up here to 10-degree angle for climb. So that's all set. And the last thing we can do is set our nav1 radio to our proper frequency. And to get that, we'll come back over here to Sky Vector. Here's the approach plate for runway 35 right, ILS in Centennial, south of Denver. And the frequency there is 111.3. We'll set the approach course a little later, and we don't have to be concerned about the altitude for the time being. We will later on set our target altitude of 8,000 feet, but that's for later on in the flight. 11130 is what we need right now, and that in fact is what we have set in the nav radio, so that's good to go. And we've got Toga on, so next step is to start. The first thing we need to do in that process is open up the timer. There's the timer, and when we actually execute the start, we'll go ahead and start the timer. Next thing is to press a little red button over here called Display Revision Mode. Now what that does, there are a number of components on this panel that operate by engine or ground power, as is the case right now. But there are some that can also operate by strictly battery power. This is one of them up here, and I'll get to that a little later. That's called the ESI, or Standby Instrument Cluster. I'm not using the exact words for that, but close enough. That's your standby instrument display, and that can run either by battery or engine power. So we'll leave that alone for the time being. But these screens here, if you were to shut down the engines during start, you would lose your engine controls. You wouldn't be able to see your engine controls, and that's critical information. So to deal with that, we'll hit this display revision mode, or reverse mode. I'm not sure what the REV is, but that's what it's called. And what it does is it displays the same thing on all screens. So they're all run now by battery, and we can proceed to light our engines. The lights, let's go up there to nav and strobe. Turn those guys on. And ignition switch can go on. This guy right over here. And the Auxilary Fuel BP. I can't remember what pump is. BP is pump. I think it's base pump or back pump, but I'm not certain. I have to check that. That anyway goes to the on position. Next thing to do is start the aircraft. And to do that, I'll walk you through the process first, and then we'll actually do it because it's a pretty quick process. What I'm going to do is raise the starter switch to the on position for 2 seconds. Just hold it for 2 seconds. That initiates the spark, gets the engines rotating, and we're going to come down here to the MFD, and we're going to take a look at this panel over here. Actually, it will appear over here. It's the CAS, which is the advisory panel. It tells you what's going on. And we're going to be looking for starter and ignition. And when those two are on, you should see them indicated in some fashion. Then we will go ahead and start to add fuel and power to the aircraft by moving our throttle forward slightly. This is an interesting device, this throttle. It goes forward and it also goes sideways, so you'll see that happening. And of course, we'll start the timer. So let's get that started and I'll walk you through it. So first things first, 2 seconds. 1, 2. See the props start to spin. Ignition and starter. There's starter and ignition and a few other things combined. I'm going to go ahead and hit a switch here which will advance the throttle to low idle. And when the NG gets above 13, which it has, I'll go ahead and advance it to high idle. Whoops, too quick. All right, let's hold off on that. The way IT comes back down. Now let's do it. There we go. Got to do these things in just the right timing. All right, when the NG is first 30% and then 50% by 50 seconds, we're up to 69 now. The ITT is up to 575. We can go ahead and further advance the throttle to flight range. And we have now had a successful start. All right, having done that, we can now come up here. So starter, CAS starter ignition off. And I'm looking now, have to go up to the upper panel, change our source over to battery. And then the GPU can come off. Do that with this panel over here. Then the chocks can clear. And then the power is in flight range, and the auxiliary fuel BP switch can come to auto. The ignition can go up to auto. We can go ahead and turn on the AP trim switch and set that for auto or on. That's your autopilot, and your trims automatically adjusted. The fuel selector switch wants to go up to auto. What that does, let me make sure that, yeah, that's up. Now I can see it. We've got our cabin lights on. We've got nav and strobe on. Pulse is something to do with the headlights flashing back and forth. We don't need that right now. All right. So now we can come back down to the panel, and we can turn display revision mode off. We can squelch the master caution. You can see it's quite a process. All right, fuel select, AP trims, display rev, gen check. Gen check main standby. We've done that before, I think. Yeah, we did that before. All right, de-ice panel. Down to our de-ice panel, the first thing we want to do is turn on inertial separation. This is a device that keeps foreign matter out of the engine. It's kind of like a filter. We can turn on the pitot heats. The bleed is off. We can turn those guys on. I'm going to come back over to that other panel in a second. We'll go ahead and turn on the air conditioning, the bleeds, pressure mode. We can rotate the hot air a little bit to direct it to the floor. Now let's come back over here, back to the de-ice system. We'll go ahead and turn on windshield and prop de-ice. And then airframe de-ice is a rather special operation. First, to do that, we have to increase our NG by advancing the throttle a little bit, up to about 80. And I found out yesterday NG stands for gas generator temperature. Don't ask me to explain that, but that's what it means. So the gas generator temperature is going to be 80. I'm doing it very slowly so I don't go too far. So there we go, about 80. And then I'm going to throw this switch up to airframe de-ice. There are two lights here, 1 and 2. You'll probably see 1 very briefly, and then I'm going to show you where it activates. And then 2 will light later on. So now that's on. Come over here and take a look. You'll see the leading edge of the wing here expand. You see that? That's a device that gets rid of ice on the leading edge of the wing. So those two systems are now working properly. And we come, back down here to that panel. You see the lights are now off. So we can go ahead and turn that off, and we can turn off the prop and windshield de-ice systems. When we need them, we turn the switches on. This is just testing them to make sure they're in operational order. All right, ECS, we've already taken care of that. The trim and flight controls, we'll check the yokes. Make sure that we've got proper yoke. Let's go in the back and see what we look like back there. If we can find, yeah, sure. Okay, rudder, it's fine. That also operates the main gear. Ailerons are fine. We're in good shape. All right, now last thing we'll do is a prop feather test. Let's come down here. To do a prop feather test, we want to shift the prop. You can see our auto fuel selector to operate there by flipping the switch back. To do a prop feather test, we want to switch the prop from this position over to high idle. And I have a switch on my yoke here that will enable me to do that just by going down one. Maybe it's up one. Oh, I know what's wrong. I did this yesterday. Yeah, you have to have the throttle in flight idle range, and we, of course, had accelerated it up to do that wing heater test. So I had to bring the throttle back down to flight idle range. Now if I use my key, you see it turns it down into feather. You can hear the engine feathering, and when it does that, it's kind of neat when it does the feather. It actually slows that engine down to a very slow crawl, and it rotates the props into the flat still position. And then when we go ahead and defeather, it'll rotate them again. Prop goes up to flight idle and starts to spin. So that's the flight or the prop feather test. Okay, we're getting ready here. We're going to start taxiing. A couple of chores we need to do first. One is the transponder. Come down here and take a look at that. Transponder, which is now on, which is fine. It was on standby. It automatically, now that the engine is on, it goes to on. When we get ready to take off, we'll set it to Alt, which is the mode for flight, where the transponder will emit a signal and take care of business outside the aircraft. One thing we can do here is raise this little device here on the glare shield. This is called the Alpha. Your simulator is running slow. No, forget about that. It always runs slow. This is called the Alpha, or Angle of Attack Indicator. It's a device that allows you to see at a glance whether the angle of attack of the aircraft is high or low, or where it should be. If it's green, it's where it should be. And lights. Come up here again, lights for taxi. We'll flip that switch up one to taxi mode. And what we're going to do is advance the power and let off the park brakes, and we're going to taxi over to runway 11. So I will see you over there. All right, we're ready to proceed. I'll go ahead and increase power up to 50%. Let the park brakes go, and then we'll slowly increase the throttle until we reach 90 knots rotation speed, and then we'll try to keep it on a straight line down the runway and off.
Pusher 171, runway change, you can now set up for runway 08 right. Okay, right now, 171.
There's 50. You can see the effect of that synthetic vision. Too much power, overstressing the gearbox, all right? There's 90 knots. Got to keep it in a straight line. It does Tendency to be a little squirrely on takeoff, particularly in certain winds. Bring the gear up, tap the brakes to lock the wheels, and now we're just following the flight director. Now that we're up about 500 feet, we can go ahead and bring up the flaps. And our route is over to the left, so I'll just bank a little bit in that direction. Let's go in just a little bit closer. You notice that alpha goes to yellow if we start to climb too quickly. So we'll increase our power just a little bit. I want to zoom out on our chart so we can see where we are. And now we can go ahead and implement yaw director and autopilot. That will steer us toward our course. But the last step in that process is to go ahead and put GPS. I tap this nav button, and that put GPS here. And then we want to just hand steer a little bit in the direction of our course. When we get within the proximity, when we get close to the line, the aircraft will detect that, and it'll automatically switch the GPS in place of takeoff mode. But it takes a little bit of help. And you see now it's gotten the GPS in place, and it's bringing us back over to the line. And you'll see shortly we'll switch from this segment of the route to the next one, which we just did. And you can see we're banking to stay on the line. So there we are. Okay, welcome back. We've just passed Murph, and we're on our way to that little white dot on the line. That little white dot tells us that we've got about 59 seconds to go before top of descent. So what I'm going to do is come up here and hit the VNAV button, which will put VPath up here in the FMA, and we'll arm our system. And in a minute or so, maybe even less, you should have, usually at about the 1 minute mark, you get an annunciator that says flight change, vertical flight change. So now when this little indicator gets down to the center, we should activate our descent. And there goes the flight director. You can see the pink indicator as we start our descent at 1,200 feet per minute toward our altitude of 8,000 feet at STEMI. Well, actually, it's descending to 13,550 at STEMI, and then it'll continue on descending to 8,000 feet at FERPI. There's our indicator for 8,000 feet. As we approach FERPI, and we'll go ahead and switch the nav mode over to locator 1. Let's not do that. Let's instead leave it there, and we'll switch CDI over to locator 1, and that changes the FMA to locator. And what we're doing now is changing our course a little bit to go over and intersect the locator, which we will shortly do before we reach FERPI. And now we'll start banking the other way as the aircraft brings itself around to the locator. And we'll go ahead and activate APP, get that system in gear. And you can see now we've got Alt-S GS. And the GS, of course, is glide slope. We should see that turn green when we've acquired it. My guess would be in the vicinity of GDOG. And we are starting our descent, and we now switch over to glide slope. So we have acquired locator and glide slope, and you can see displayed on the synthetic screen here a wonderful feature, which is these moving boxes, and we are dead center in the middle of them as we make our approach to runway 35 right. Zoom in a little bit on the MFD so we can see our runway. And now as we get within range here, not quite yet, I'll let it go a little bit more, but before we touch down, we'll switch off the autopilot using the yoke to do that. Which I have mapped to a button on my yoke. We'll just switch off autopilot and yaw director. Landing lights are on. Flaps can go down full, and we'll go ahead and drop the gear. Here we come. Perfect. Right down the pipe. And with that, we start dropping, so I'll go ahead and kill the autopilot. Maintain our course because I can see the PAPI lights indicate we're right on the glide slope, and you can also see it on the PFD there, right in the middle of those boxes, is the place to be. You can practically keep the runway right in the middle of the alpha screen. Just kind of a nice way to do it. Our speed right at about 95. And when we reach final, we'll just flare just a little bit.
Approaching 3, 5, right.
Indeed we are. Retard. Reverse. Taxi range. And let's just pull off here. And look for a place to park. I'm going to leave it right here in front of this building. So we'll bring the prop back up to flight range, put the park brake on. Let that alarm go. All right, so the first thing is we'll go ahead and turn the lights off. And then we want to start powering down. And the way to do that is to first shift our throttle over to high idle, like there. And we'll let that cool down for a couple of minutes. While that's going on, we'll take care of some other chores. We've turned our landing lights off. You can see the prop winding down. There goes the nav and strobe lights. We've lowered the alpha screen. Flight director can go off. That's down here. You'll see the FMA screen go black. And then the trim can be neutral. You can check our trims right here. I'm going to go ahead and flip this back over to go back to there. All right, so trims, elevator, let's go ahead and set those down. Yeah. Flaps are up. Rudder still over to the right. I'm not sure what that's all about. I'll have to check that. Trim light, CB light. CB light can go off. Ice panel, unswitch everything on the ice panel. We can turn off the AC, lead, and pressure mode. And now we can turn our throttle over to low idle. And that further depowers the engine. I'm reading as I talk to you here. DS panel, ECS panel, power low idle to finally to cutoff. And cutoff will do exactly as it sounds. It will shut down the engines and allow the prop to come to a stop. It should. There we go. Like that. Okay, jumping back inside, alarms can come off. That can come off too. It's a wrong key. Turn that guy off. Okay, auxiliary fuel. Let's go up to the upper panel. Whoops, wrong button. Number 4. So, we can start over here on the right. We can bring the APs off to the off position. The AP and trims, fuel can come down to from auto to on to off. Ignition can come down to on to off. The engine is already stopped, so we don't need the starter switch. There we go. All right, last thing, we can bring the crash bar down, and that will turn all our power off. We've got the cabin lights off. That's now off. And we'll come down to the panel, and the last thing we've got is this, see if I have a name here, for standby display is what this is called, the standby display. And that's now operating on battery. And so to make this operate, or to make this shut down so you don't wear out your battery, you tap on this M key here. And now to shut it down, you tap that a few more times. You get a little indicator there. And it says shutdown. And in order to shut it down, you come over here to the plus sign and you hold it. And it will shortly shut down. Now that that's done, take a last look around. Everything's copacetic in here. Got our earphones down here. Those are handy, by the way, if you want to just muffle the sound of the engines. You just put the earphones on and it'll muffle the sound of the engines for you. I don't think they've got music implemented in this model yet, but that should be coming soon. And the last thing I'm going to go ahead and do is rotate this fuel switch to the off position and check everything else out. I'll do that after we're all done. But we can hop outside. And of course, to do that, we want to just open the doors and give it a little push. The ladder comes down. Now, you're never done with this aircraft. What you need to do first is make sure the chocks are placed in. Then, let's see, the payload, we want to cover things up. Just lift that up so you can see the airplane. And once again, we want to cover the wicks back here. Let me come around to this side and see if we can get a better view of some of these things. Cover the wick. That's that guy. We can do the covers in the back. It's hard to see those because they're red and they're on this red background. There it is. It's up here next to the SH. We can open up the stern door and let people come out of there. We can cover the pitot heat. I think those are underneath the wings, if I'm not correct. Let me just see if I can get underneath here. It doesn't want to go that way. I'm using my... Well, okay. Not sure how to get down there. That just wants to go forward and backward. There we go. Now maybe we can see it. Yeah, there's the pitot tube. So we cover that like so. Fuel, we don't have to worry about that. We can get the baggage out of the front compartment. And the last thing is the cover of the props and the ties and the ties on the props and the cover on the cowling. And you'll probably see a note there that says, will set when engine is cooled off. As you can well imagine, this engine is pretty hot after running for an hour or so. And so if you come down here to TBM900, you can pick a menu item that says engine temperatures. It tells you that our ITT temperature right now is 322.3 centigrade, which is that's pretty hot. You put a cowling on that thing, you're going to melt it. And the same thing with the exhaust. The oil from the red box is 62 degrees, and so forth. So what we can do is come over here to our airframe, or rather to our maintenance manager, and take a look through that, just to show you, among other things, what's in there. Here's our engine. We open that up, and you can go through and pick all the components of the engine and replace them if they need replacement. You can then go to the landing gear and access that. When it does, it actually lifts the airplane up on stanchions, and you can replace tires and brakes and all kinds of stuff. Electronics, you can access that. You can then do a test of your battery. Brings up a battery meter. Looks like we're in good shape with the battery. Then avionics. I want to go back to electronics to see what some of those other things are. My goodness, look at all of these electronic components you can replace. Windshield heat, propeller heat, you can replace that. Avionics, all of those components and pieces and boxes, electronics, lights, all the little lights on the tail and on the wingtips. You can even replace elements of the airframe. You want to put a new tail on, new ailerons, you can buy all that. I'm not sure how much this thing got to go over for over $2 million, so somewhere you'd have to add all that up. Even miscellaneous, you can buy a new tank, fill it up with oxygen, repair it, new valves, all kinds of stuff. Really neat. So once you get through doing all that stuff, now let's take and, oh, look at this. So our engine has cooled down, and we've gone ahead and put on the prop protectors. They're actually what they are is anchors so that the prop doesn't spin around in the wind. Not a bad idea. So having done that, we can close the door there. We can close the pilot's door. Those guys can stay there if they want. We can close the rear door. We can make this screen go away. And that's it. The TBM900. A terrific sim aircraft, believe me. Some piece of work. There's a cover on the front cowling. I hadn't seen that before. Right in here, and where the air intake is, there's a cover that goes in there. Pretty neat stuff. So I'm sure we'll be flying this again before long, and maybe by then I'll know something about it. Which reminds me that one of the purposes of this flight, being kind of the first flight here on Desk-Bound Aviator, is to find out things that I don't know. And you can tell that there's a lot that I don't know about this aircraft. So those of you who have flown this and who are professionals and who are watching this, having a good laugh, if you can point out some of the error of my ways and things that I forgot, that'd be great. All the rest of you who are just here for the fun of it, I hope you had some fun. I certainly did, and I appreciate you being with me today. This is Steve, your desk-bound aviator. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Have a good day and stay healthy.